Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. I'm Dan Casper, as always. Hey, don't forget to check out the Swag Cave, brought to you by Residence Branding Company, the official swag provider for the podcast. That link is in the podcast description. A little bit of a shorter episode of the Man Cave Podcast here. Going to be talking with Rob Demovsky, ESPN NFL Nation Packers reporter. I'm sure all of you Packers fans know who Rob Demovsky is. Fantastic work, as always, at ESPN.com, covering the Green Bay Packers, and always appreciate Rob joining us and talking to us whenever we can. So, without further ado, let's get right to it. Joining us right now is Mr. Rob Demovsky, ESPN Packers NFL Nation writer over there. Rob, first of all, big thanks for taking a few minutes and catching up with us here in the Chippewa Valley in Eau Claire.
You got it, Dan. How are you?
Not too bad, man. Not too bad. So obviously I know things are busy with you, given what happened on Friday night and leading into this week. And Matt LaFleur had his press conference yesterday, and he threw out the word if Jordan Love isn't cleared to get this start. Do you think that was a little gamesmanship from Matt LaFleur, or do you think there's still maybe a little bit of a chance Jordan Love could potentially play?
Boy, I think it was gamesmanship, Dan. I don't see how there's any way that, A, he can play, and B, they would actually clear him and put him out there given, potential risk so soon. For re-injury, especially considering what they just paid the guy, right? Like, you got to protect him long term. And later in the press conference, he said that they would never jeopardize anything, in the long term for a short term gain. Most of the rest of the questions and answers had the tone of Malik Willis is going to be starting and how they're going to prepare him and what they need to do and that sort of thing. I don't see. And I can't imagine the Colts actually falling for that either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So Malik Willis going to be the starter, then we would assume. Do you think Matt LaFleur, and I know Matt LaFleur's talked about this ever since a few times, do you think he's maybe kind of thinking back to when Jordan Love had that start for Aaron Rodgers in that Kansas City Chiefs game, how he prepared Jordan Love, and maybe kind of thinking about, okay, what can I do differently to maybe prepare Malik Willis for this game?
That's a great question, and I think that's that's going to be a big test for him, and it's probably good that he went through that, with Jordan in 2021, and the difference there was that they didn't find out until, I believe it was Wednesday morning, if I remember correctly, that Rodgers had tested positive for COVID. So they had spent, Monday and Tuesday of that week preparing for an unbelievable team in the Chiefs and preparing with the game plan for Aaron Rodgers. And LaFleur then later admitted that, they basically just tried to take that same game plan and flip it over to Jordan Love. And that was it was just a tough ask for Jordan at that point in his career. So I didn't even think of that as a great lesson, but that's a great point you bring up, because he has mentioned several times that they took the responsibility for not giving Jordan a game plan that he can be successful with. And, so now not only have they had, the full week with Malik, actually they had more than a full week because it happened on Friday. So, I would suspect that they will, at least come up with something that they think that Malik can be successful with, rather than just throwing the same game plan they would at the Colts, if Jordan were playing.
We've had a few of our listeners kind of chime in and say this is why we wanted Green Bay to sign somebody like Ryan Tannehill, a veteran backup quarterback, and I know that name's been thrown out there and such. But with them trading for Malik Willis, does this kind of maybe give the impression that maybe Goody, preferred a guy like Malik Willis over somebody like Ryan Tannehill? And I know hindsight's 20/20, but you got some fans that are kind of coming out saying, "See, this is why they should have gotten Ryan Tannehill."
Here's the thing I love about fans, and I guess I say this a little bit tongue in cheek, is they assume that Ryan Tannehill would just want to come here.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Tannehill has made, I believe, you can check me on this, $196 million in his career. Why would a guy like Ryan Tannehill want to come out of whatever he's doing for a couple $1 million and put his body potentially through something that could alter his life. You know, it's just like that's the crazy thing is that people think, oh, yep, I'm sure Ryan Tannehill just wants to jump at the opportunity. I don't think he does from what I was told, and I don't think they want to pay. I don't think they want to pay him $15 million for the rest of the year. So if you're Ryan Tannehill, why do that? Not everybody thinks. Not every player thinks like fans. In fact, most don't. So now, whether you think they did reach out to Ryan Tannehill or didn't, there's been conflicting reports on that. I would suspect that they did, even if it was just a sort of back channel casual thing. Because here's an interesting fact for you: Brian Gutekunst's agent is also Ryan Tannehill's agent. So do you think Brian Gutekunst hasn't talked to his agent about Ryan Tannehill? Absolutely he has. And I guarantee you that he told him that, Ryan Tannehill's not interested. It's not fantasy football, like you can't just, I'm going to pick this guy up and put him in my lineup. Now, that being said, at the end of training camp, they got to the end of it between the competition of Michael Pratt and Sean Clifford, and felt like neither one of them was the best option if something happened to Jordan. So I'm not so sure Malik Willis is based on his past experience, but they do, and they thought that he was an upgrade. So I did wonder though, Dan, if in the long term, okay, maybe they think Malik Willis is a better option. But just given how recently he got here, if for this week they might go with Sean Clifford, as even off the practice squad, just because he knows more of the offense. But they're not going that way, so I think that's a little bit interesting. I personally, if it were up to me, I probably would have started Sean Clifford. Not to say that he's better than Malik Willis overall, but he might be better than Malik Willis right now.
He's Rob Demovsky, ESPN NFL Nation Packers reporter, joining us here this morning. You can make sure you follow Rob on Twitter /X, whatever the kids are calling it these days, at Rob Demovsky, and check out all of his work at ESPN.com. So with the game now coming up with the Colts here, just really quick going back to Friday's game, defensively, this was the first time we got to see Jeff Hafley. The honeymoon was over with with all the positive stuff kind of being said. Fans were eating it all up with what Jeff was saying and the players were saying. And then, Friday nights, Overreaction Monday, you had some fans kind of like, what's going on with the defense here? How much can we really take away from week one, field conditions over there in Brazil? What kind of stood out to you with that defensive performance?
I think that there was definitely some positive and definitely some bad stuff too. I thought they struggled to stop the run. Obviously, Saquon was probably the difference in the game in a lot of ways. But I also thought there was there's definitely some positives. He's preached an aggressive style, and he came with it. He blitzed a bunch, and they got burned on a bunch. So I think there was also, a need or a desire to take the ball away, and they took it away 3 times. It's not necessarily the defense's fault that they got 2 turnovers right away, Xavier McKinney's interception and the fumble recovery, and the offense only turned it into 6 points, right? If it's 14-0 there instead of 6-0, maybe you feel a little differently about the fact that they gave up, 34 points. But I think the most troubling thing was that when they needed to get off the field at the end of the game and give the offense the ball back, they couldn't. What the Eagles burn off about 6.5 minutes of the last 7 minutes of that clock. That was problematic a little bit. But I do think that there were some signs. You got key position. Edgerrin Cooper, who didn't really play at all in the preseason, came in late in the game and made a couple plays. So I'm not ready to completely, deem this another Joe Barry, Mike Pettin, end of the Dom Capers era defense yet. So I'm still willing to say, let's wait and see what it is. None of these guys played really much in the preseason. They didn't show much in the preseason. And I know Philadelphia had its offensive struggles late last year, but Philadelphia is a pretty potent offense. Those are two really good receivers and, a quarterback who's looking to prove that he's more like he was, the previous couple of years than he was the second half of last year. So, I'm still willing to take a wait-and-see approach with it. There were plenty of times, Dan, I think it was a few years ago in a season opener at Chicago where the defense kind of won the day, and Aaron Rodgers said, "We got a defense now,"
Yeah.
and they still ended up stinking. And then they've had season openers like the year that they had to go down to Jacksonville and play the Saints down in Jacksonville, and they got rolled 34-3, and they ended up going to the NFC Championship game that year. So season openers are obviously fun, highly anticipated, but they're not always a true measure of how a team's going to be.
Just two more questions here, quick for you, Rob. I saw you because I love it when you tweet out the percentage of play snaps or and that. And two things really stood out to me. One, Tucker Kraft with the wide gap between him and Luke Musgrave, and Evan Williams, a guy that we talked about a lot in preseason, not getting any snaps on the defensive side.
Not a single defensive snap. That one really jumped out at me, and as you're watching the game, and I was actually not at the game, but so it's a little bit hard to see on TV who's playing in the secondary. Just because of the kid. When you're there, one of the things I always do when I'm watching the game from the press box is I always chart or try to chart who's on the field at most times, or at least what package they're in, nickel, dime, base, whatever. And I thought Evan Williams didn't play, and sure enough, when I saw the playtime sheet, not one snap. And this is a guy who probably made more splash plays, more takeaways in training camp than anybody else. So I was quite surprised at that, and I'm wondering if there's going to be a way to get him on the field. And then Tucker Kraft is sort of it's a little bit of a continuation of what we saw in training camp, more with Luke Musgrave. Just really hasn't – he was kind of a non-factor during training camp, which is really surprising considering last summer in training camp, and I'm sure when you had me on at this time last year, I told everybody pick Luke Musgrave up in your fantasy drafts because he was catching everything in training camp, and they were throwing his way a ton. This summer they didn't throw his way a ton, and he didn't play a bunch. So I did say before the season on Wilde and Tausch's show on ESPN Milwaukee and Madison that my bold prediction was that Tucker Kraft would catch 50 passes this season, and I think he's on pace right now after the game. I had a feeling that he was going to be a bigger part of the offense than he was going into last season, and combine that with Musgrave's relative lack of involvement this summer. I thought that was a good bet.
Lastly here, Rob, I think a lot of fans, and if we knew the exact answer, we probably would be playing the lottery right now and trying to win a bunch of millions of dollars here. But fans want to know, can this Packers team win against the Colts with Malik Willis starting at quarterback? Do you think they've got enough talent? Can they run the ball against the Colts? Can the defense slow down Anthony Richardson and such? Do you think from what you've seen, obviously Malik is a big unknown at this point, do they have enough talent elsewhere to still beat the Colts without Jordan Love, in your opinion?
It's a hard one. I think, I'll put it to you this way. I think if, the original timeline on Jordan Love was 3 to 4 or 3 to 6 weeks, whatever it was. I think if he has to play 3 games, I think he can win one. I just don't know if it's this one, not necessarily because of the opponent, just because it's the first one, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do think he can win a game for them. He did win a game in Tennessee. He started 3 and won 1. Now, if you go back and look at those games in 2022 when he started, I don't know that they won because of him. He did not throw very many passes. In fact, he did not have a passing game of over 100 yards in any of those 3 starts, which is, I think he threw for 99, 80-something, and 50-some yards, which is not much.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think they can win a game with him. I don't know if it's this one.
He's Rob Demovsky, ESPN NFL Nation Packers reporter. Again, make sure you're checking out all of his fantastic work, ESPN.com, and give him a follow on Twitter /the X at Rob Demovsky. Rob, we appreciate you taking some time and chatting with us up here in Eau Claire in the Chippewa Valley. Best of luck the rest of the season, and we'll be following along. Okay, bud?
You got it, Dan. Thanks for having me. We'll be seeing you.
All right, and that is going to do it for us on this quick episode of the Man Cave Podcast. quick conversation with ESPN NFL Nation writer Rob Demovsky, who covers the Packers. Always appreciate our conversations with Rob, and for him taking some time to talk to us. So, as always, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Man Cave podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toys and Ford. And don't forget to check out Swag Cave, the residence branding company Swag Cave. That link is in the podcast description. Until next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave podcast.